Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy FELLOWSHOW. My name is Kyle. Today, we're going to be covering the Pittsburgh Steelers, looking at their fantasy football players that will be relevant for us this season. We'll look at the depth chart for the offensive pieces. We'll look at the new draft class. We'll look at the guys that they added and lost in free agency. But before we get into any of that, I just want to show this is the team page. I have the link in the description below. It's got all the information that I'm going to cover in this video. I like to, at least acknowledge the head coach, Mike Tomlin. He's been back for I don't know how many years it's been now, but he's maybe a decade, 11, 12 years, who knows. But then the new change here, though, is offensive coordinator Matt Canada. So let's look into Matt Canada and see what he's about here. So he's 49 years old. Before he took the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator job, he was their quarterbacks coach last year. But he also, before he, popped into the NFL, he was the Maryland Terrapins interim head coach. He was their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. He did work at LSU in 2017, offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. Pittsburgh Panthers, coordinator, quarterbacks coach. NC State, Wisconsin, Northern Illinois, Indiana. So a lot of big, Big Ten schools, a couple, the Pittsburgh, NC State, ACC. You got the LSU in there. So a lot of big name schools here, and he's got an offensive coordinating and a quarterback's background. So I like what I see here. We'll see how he meshes with Ben Roethlisberger. And I don't know. I think it's a really solid hire. And we're going to skip the depth chart for now. I want to look at the draft class. I think that's a good spot to start. So 2021 draft class. Everyone knows first overall pick for them was Najee Harris out of Alabama. There was an obvious need at running back. This was probably one of the easier first-round picks to kind of pencil in or write in when you're doing your mock drafts. And it's a great fit. It's really the guy that they needed to have on their roster. They lost James Conner. They really haven't had a bruising, healthy back for a while. We could see them return to some smash mouth football. So I'm super excited about Najee Harris. He's, where he is in dynasty leagues. He's not the second, third pick in a standard league. He's high up there. And for super flex leagues, he's a top 5 pick as well. But for redraft leagues, we're going to be talking about Najee in a little bit. And I'll kind of cover where I think he can be. I think at the moment right now, he's probably like a third and in the second round value. He's going to be one of the most productive most productive running backs this season as a rookie. So I love him. We'll talk about him more in a little bit once we get to the depth chart. But after the first round pick, they take Pat Freiermuth, the Penn State tight end here. It might be a while before we see what Pat Freiermuth can do. They still have Eric Ebron, but I like the fit here. He's just your prototypical really good blocking tight end, really good pass catching tight end. He's kind of maybe a poor man's version of a TJ Hawkinson, but I like the move here to go running back. Then you get a tight end, and they come back with 2 offensive linemen here in the third and the fourth round. They get Kendrick Green out of Illinois and Dan Moore, offensive tackle out of Texas A&M. So heavy offensive start here. Come back with linebacker Buddy Johnson out of Texas A&M at the end of the fourth. A defensive tackle, a defensive end, cornerback, and then a punter here from Georgia Tech. Have you guys seen the Georgia Tech punter? Massive dude who can really boot the ball. So I like the move there. But offensive focus heavy. First 4 picks are offense. The last 4 picks are defense, and then a punter at the very end as the cherry on top. So a really good class. I like the direction that they are going. We'll see if these offensive pieces on the offensive line can help and contribute this year. But for the moment right now, this draft class is all about Najee Harris and adding that toughness element to the running game. And James Conner is a good running back. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Really hasn't given Pittsburgh that identity of a hard-nosed team running the football, playing great defense. So Najee Harris can do that. We should see a return to Pittsburgh's kind of old smash mouth style here. So we're looking at the notable additions now through free agency. They got offensive tackle Joe Hagg, safety Miles Killebrew, center BJ Finney, and then they did sign running back Kalen Ballage for a nice depth piece. Now I'm a little bit nervous. To me, the additions outweigh the departures. So they lost Bud Dupree, they lost Mike Hilton, they lost Matt Filer. I don't know if he started for them. They lost Alejandro Villanueva, and they lost James Conner. So this is a lot of big names that they lost on the defensive side of the ball. They're losing their starting running back, but they plug in Najee, so that's good. But then they lose 2 offensive tackles here, but they were able to sign Joe Hagg. So it's a really good complementary additions to their subtractions. And then just adding the pieces, I think, on the draft day, the running back, the two offensive pieces here, a tight end. It's a pretty well balanced offseason for Pittsburgh, and it should get them back to again that physical style of running the football, playing great defense. And I don't know. We're gonna look at the depth chart now. Before we look at the depth chart, though, let's just pull up some of the numbers from last season with these guys. So Ben Roethlisberger, not his best season. He played, he played, I think, what was it, almost 15 or 14 games. He did throw for 3,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Now, his problem was his yards per attempt were very low. It was 6.25 yards per attempt. He kind of dinked and dunked a lot with Juju Smith-Schuster. So I'm hoping to see him. Maybe he's a little bit healthier this year. Maybe he's extending the field a little bit more. But I'm into Ben Roethlisberger. I think he was quarterback 14 last year, which makes him serviceable in superflex leagues. You might have to kind of pick your moments. If you're trying one quarterback leagues, you're going to have to probably pair him with somebody. Maybe you draft Roethlisberger and the guy like Baker Mayfield, who we just covered in the video before. But if you draft Ben Roethlisberger in a one quarterback league, you'll probably want to have someone in tandem with him to play the matchups. But again, I think superflex leagues, you could probably leave him in there and expect top 15 production. Now we know, I guess looking back at the stats from last year, we'll skip the running backs because we know James Conner's gone. But they gave Benny Snell a lot of work last year. That was just an absence of James Conner. But between the two running backs, they gave them 280 carries. So Najee Harris is probably walking into 250 plus carries right away. That's a low end number too. Like he could get 280 all by himself. So if you just combine all these stats here, that's 280 carries, 1,089 yards, and 10 touchdowns. That might be Najee Harris's floor this season. And then between the two for catches, that's 45 catches and 276 yards, no touchdowns, but you're probably looking at, a 12 to 1,300 yard season with rushing and receiving yards. I would expect double-digit touchdowns out of Najee Harris. Oh, man, he's probably worth like a late second-round pick. Like if you have the 24th and 25th overall picks at the turn there, that's probably a good spot to start thinking about Najee Harris. So let's look at the receivers real quick from last year. We really only care about Deontay Johnson, Juju, and Chase Claypool. Now, Deontay Johnson led the team in targets, 144 targets, 88 catches. He also led the team in yards with 923. Juju had the most receptions. He had 97 catches on 128 targets, 831 yards. And his problem was it was for 8.6 yards per catch. So we need him to extend the field a little bit more. We need Roethlisberger to find him a little bit deeper. But he did come out with 9 touchdowns. So he had a pretty solid season for fantasy. Now, Chase Claypool was the guy that caught everybody by surprise. He had 62 catches on 109 targets, 873 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So my only knock with Chase Claypool is I want to see him become more efficient. A lot of his targets were incomplete, kind of deep ball shots, kind of things like that. So maybe they work him a little bit more over the field, a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, so Ben can kind of pick him off and get more Chase Claypool involved in the offense. So we love those receivers. For tight end, they only used 2 tight ends last year, Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald. Ebron had 56 catches, 91 targets, almost basically 558 yards and 5 touchdowns. Vance McDonald was kind of an afterthought here, so that kind of makes me nervous for Pat Freiermuth. I don't think he's going to be very useful at all this season for fantasy. I did project him a little bit here, 15 catches, 155 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We'll see, though. I did have to bring down Eric Ebron's numbers just a little bit as we see if they can get Pat Freiermuth on the field right away. So let's go look at the 2021 depth chart. Of course, I've talked about Ben Roethlisberger. Mason Rudolph's back. Josh Dobbs is back. And they added Dwayne Haskins. So that's kind of fun. Pretty decent quarterback room now. If Mason Rudolph fails, they always can go to Dwayne Haskins and see what he can do. But it's all about Ben Roethlisberger. We'll see if he plays more in the future. But we know he's here for this season. And again, I think he can be a top 15 type quarterback for you. He's going to be a super flex option for me for sure with those receivers and just adding Najee. This might be a really hard team to defend. So again, we talked a lot about Najee Harris here too, so I'll just cover his backups. Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland, Kalen Ballage, who they added in free agency. They still have Jalen Samuels, and they still have Trey Edmonds. So it's actually a pretty deep running back room, but we fully expect Najee Harris to get the full workload here. Let me just look at my numbers real quick. For now, I gave Najee Harris the full 280 carries. He's rushing for almost a little over 1,100 yards. I got him 10 touchdowns. I also gave him 44 catches, 300 yards, and a touchdown. So I've got him upwards of 1,400 yards, 11 touchdowns. He's an RB2 plus, folks. He might be an RB1, might be a top 10 running back by the end of the season. So I'm trying to acquire him if you can in a redraft league. You're probably, again, you're gonna have to think about him late second, especially at the end of the second round, early part of the third round. So try to get him if you can. It should be a fun rookie season for Najee Harris. And then the receivers, you're talking Juju, you're talking Deontay, you're talking Chase Claypool. I believe Deontay Johnson's the first Pittsburgh Steelers receiver off the board as early as the fourth, sometimes fifth round. Again, he led the team in targets. He led the team he didn't lead the team in catches, but he led them in yards. So catches and yards. No, yards and what am I pulling up? Yards and targets. That's what he led them in. 10.5 yards per catch. Still had 7 touchdowns. I do think Deontay Johnson's probably the receiver that I want to own from this team the most. And again, it costs roughly a 5th-round pick. If you look at his numbers from last year, let me just filter by PPR here. He was the wide receiver 21. Chase Claypool was wide receiver 22. Juju Smith-Schuster was wide receiver 16. So there's a legit chance that Ben Roethlisberger can finish with 3 wide receiver 2s again this year. I just think if I'm betting on one guy, I want Deontay Johnson amongst the others. Chase Claypool should build off his good rookie season, but he's going to be a little bit more boom bust. I would advise Chase Claypool for best ball league. I think that's probably the best advice I can give on just drafting Chase Claypool, not have to worry about his ups and downs. And then Juju Smith-Schuster is probably the most consistent. He's going to be peppered with targets. You just don't know how many yards he's going to get, but he should be good for touchdowns too. So I'm into all 3 guys, Deontay, Juju, and Chase Claypool. I'll typically take whoever falls to me when I find fair value. But they're all on my board for sure this season. The backups still James Washington's there. Ray McLeod should make the team as well. Anthony Johnson, Cody White, Tyler Simmons, Matthew Sexton, and then UDFA's Isaiah McCoy and Rico Busey. And then the tight ends again, Eric Ebron, Pat Freiermuth. They got backups Zach Gentry, Dax Raymond, and Kevin Rader. I'm interested in Eric Ebron. I just think if I'm going to draft anybody from the Steelers, I want Najee Harris. And then we're looking at those receivers. So Ebron's kind of like the 5th guy in the pecking order. I don't know if I need him for tight end. I might prefer some other guys. But if you do go after Eric Ebron, just pair him with another guy, another tight end that you can kind of play the matchups and see how it goes. Pat Freiermuth, we're probably not going to use for a redraft, but I'm interested in him in the 2nd round of dynasty drafts. So, but I don't know. This is one of the best AFC Norths that we've seen in a while. It wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals won, but you could realistically see the Ravens, the Steelers, or the Browns all win this division. The Steelers probably have the most consistency going forward. They just added Najee Harris. They got a really good defense, and just really, it's really an exciting time for a Pittsburgh fan. Don't know how much longer we're gonna get Ben Roethlisberger, but again, I'm optimistic here with all these offensive weapons and just the Mike Tomlin's philosophy staying in place. New offensive coordinator. There should be some really good Steeler options for us for fantasy football this year. So that's gonna do it for the Pittsburgh Steelers fantasy preview. I'm gonna probably hop on to the NFC North next, so we'll cover all those teams, and that concludes the AFC North. So thank you guys so much for your time. We'll see you in another video. Peace.